I want you to write a detailed script based on the outline I provide for a royal monarchy using a bold, dramatic, and immersive storytelling approach. The script should be structured according to the provided subheading, ensuring that each section builds upon the previous one without abrupt endings or disconnections. The script must maintain a smooth, continuous narrative flow rather than feeling segmented and follow the words count length mentioned with each outline. Write in a paragraph. 3. Format. Hook and transition line will be same according to section for all. Tone and style. The script should have a bold, cinematic, and suspenseful tone to keep the audience engaged. The storytelling should be narrative-driven, focusing on mystery, foreshadowing, and emotional highs and lows. Avoid a dry, biographical format. The script should feel like an investigative and shocking exposé. No visual descriptions, scene instructions, or visual storytelling elements. This should be purely 3. Narrative. Use a mix of short and long sentences to control pacing and enhance drama. Engagement techniques that must be used. Cliffhangers and foreshadowing must be incorporated to build suspense. Ensure the script remains emotional and immersive, making the audience feel the struggles, triumphs, and betrayals. No standalone endings in any section. Each section should naturally flow into the next subheading without abrupt conclusions. Use bold and dramatic phrasing to emphasize key moments, struggles, and turning points. Highlight the contrast between success and suffering, making the story compelling. Section breakdown and storytelling approach. Each section must maintain a smooth transition, ensuring a continuous flow of storytelling. The narrative should be engaging, avoiding unnecessary factual overload. Avoid listing events mechanically. Each event must be woven into the broader arc of their journey. The script should not reset at each subheading but carry the momentum forward. 3. Ensuring previous and next subheadings remain connected. Language and accessibility. Use simple yet powerful language that is accessible to a broad audience. Maintain a storytelling approach, so the script should feel like a dramatic retelling rather than an encyclopedia entry. Avoid formal or academic tones, but the language should feel conversational and immersive. Ensure vivid descriptions through strong word choice rather than relying on visual cues or direct scene instructions. Insert 3. Subheading here. Word count. Approximately 500. Tone and style. Suspenseful, politically charged, emotionally layered hook. For years, Queen Camilla's household had operated like a protected fortress inside the royal machine. But according to palace whispers, Prince William no longer viewed that inner circle as harmless ceremonial staff. He reportedly saw something far more dangerous: a competing network of influence surrounding a weakened king. Key points. Clarence House historically functioned with its own 3. Loyal advisors and administrative structure. Reports suggest William became increasingly frustrated with old guard palace operators tied closely to Camilla. Royal insiders claim disagreements intensified during King Charles III's ongoing health struggles. Some aides allegedly accused of bypassing Kensington Palace communication channels. Discussions of streamlining the monarchy reportedly used to justify the restructuring. Several longtime Camilla allies quietly removed from high access. Scheduling roles. Media figures begin describing a widening divide between William's future court and Camilla's loyalists. The phrase "the heirs accord" begins circulating among insiders tied to William's camp transition line. Yet what truly shook palace veterans was not the demotions themselves, but the chilling realization that William may have been following a strategy prepared long before this crisis even began. Generate a detailed documentary-style script based on the provided outline. 3. Subheading. Maintain a bold, dramatic, and engaging storytelling approach with smooth transitions between sections. Avoid word repetition and ensure each section flows naturally into the next. Avoid adding outline headings. Just write the script and follow the words count length given along with each outline above. For years, Queen Camilla's household had operated like a protected fortress inside the royal machine. But according to palace whispers, Prince William no longer viewed that inner 3. Circle as harmless ceremonial staff. He reportedly saw something far more dangerous: a competing network of influence surrounding a weakened king. The deeper royal commentators looked into the growing crisis surrounding Clarence House. the clearer it became that this was not simply about reorganizing schedules or reducing ceremonial duties. Reports suggest William had become increasingly frustrated with what insiders called the old guard attached closely to Camilla's operation experienced. Palace figures who had survived decades of royal transitions and quietly accumulated influence behind the scenes. Clarence House had long functioned with its own loyal advisors, private secretaries, communications figures, and administrative networks. Almost like a parallel command structure within the monarchy itself. Under normal circumstances, that arrangement might never have triggered concern. But these were not normal circumstances anymore. The crown was under pressure. Charles III's ongoing health struggles had created uncertainty throughout palace operations, and according to multiple royal insiders, disagreements over access, influence, and long-term planning were becoming harder to contain with each passing week. What reportedly troubled William most was the growing belief that certain palace operators were involved. Surrounding Camilla had begun bypassing traditional communication channels connected to Kensington Palace. Sources familiar with internal royal structures claim important. Scheduling discussions and strategic briefings were increasingly moving through Clarence House loyalists before reaching William's circle. Whether those concerns were fully justified remains unclear, but insiders whispered that the Prince of Wales viewed the situation as an unacceptable fracture forming inside the institution at precisely the wrong moment. Palace veterans allegedly began noticing tension building quietly between younger advisors aligned with William and older courtiers deeply loyal to Camilla's household network. Conversations reportedly became colder, invitations narrower, trust harder to maintain. The atmosphere inside royal operations, according to some commentators, started resembling a silent political battlefield disguised beneath ceremonial tradition. As the situation escalated, public language about streamlining the monarchy reportedly became the official explanation used to justify the restructuring. But behind closed doors, insiders claim the meaning was far more serious than simple modernization. Several longtime Camilla allies were quietly removed from high-access scheduling roles connected to sensitive royal operations. Others allegedly lost proximity to key planning discussions without warning or explanation. No dramatic public dismissals ever came. That was what made the entire situation feel even more chilling. Everything happened softly, almost invisibly, as though the institution itself was attempting to erase tension before it could become public scandal. Yet palace insiders insist the fear inside Clarence House grew impossible to ignore. Veteran staff members who once believed their positions untouchable suddenly found themselves uncertain about their future inside the monarchy they had served for decades. Meanwhile, royal commentators and media figures began openly discussing what many inside palace walls had apparently feared for months: the widening divide between William's future court and Camilla's loyalists. According to reports circulating through royal circles, aides close to William had even started using a phrase that deeply unsettled members of the old establishment, the heirs accord. The term itself sounded ominous, almost strategic, as though preparations were already underway for a monarchy beyond Charles's reign. Some insiders interpreted it as a sign that William was building a tighter alliance around his future leadership, one designed to centralize loyalty and eliminate competing influence networks before they could threaten the stability of the crown. Others believed it reflected something more personal: a growing determination inside William's camp to ensure the monarchy's next chapter would no longer be shaped by the complicated rivalries that had haunted previous royal eras. However, while palace veterans struggled to understand how quickly the balance of power had begun shifting, a far more unsettling realization was quietly emerging beneath the surface. Yet what truly shook palace veterans was not the demotions themselves, but the chilling realization that William may have been following a strategy prepared long before this crisis even began. Behind the gold-trimmed doors of royal residences, loyalty has always mattered more than titles. And according to multiple royal commentators, Prince William had grown convinced that certain Clarence House figures remained fiercely loyal not to the institution, but to Queen Camilla personally. That suspicion reportedly became the driving force behind the growing internal crackdown now unsettling nearly every corner of the monarchy. Sources close to palace operations claim William feared that competing advisory networks were beginning to form around a vulnerable and increasingly exhausted Charles III during one of the most delicate periods of his reign. And within royal circles, few things are considered more dangerous than divided influence surrounding the crown. For generations, the monarchy survived by maintaining one central chain of trust. But insiders whisper that trust had started to fracture quietly behind closed doors long before the public noticed anything unusual. What once looked like harmless ceremonial hierarchy was now allegedly being viewed through a far darker lens inside Kensington Palace. Reports suggest William had become deeply alarmed by what some insiders described as briefing wars erupting between competing palace camps. According to various royal commentators, carefully timed stories and strategic leaks had allegedly begun appearing in media circles with increasing frequency, each one subtly shaping public perception around different members of the royal family. While no direct evidence has emerged publicly, palace veterans reportedly feared that private tensions were spilling beyond palace walls into the press itself. Some insiders even claimed certain Clarence house figures had grown too comfortable operating independently of Kensington Palace oversight, creating an atmosphere where influence no longer flowed through one united structure. For William, according to sources familiar with the situation, that was not simply frustrating, it was dangerous. The monarchy, particularly during periods of royal illness and uncertainty, depends entirely on discipline, unity, and control. And insiders whisper that William increasingly believed those foundations were beginning to weaken. As fears intensified, discussions inside palace circles reportedly shifted towards something even more sensitive: the future balance of power after Charles. Royal commentators began openly referencing tensions involving who would ultimately shape palace operations in the next reign. Some longtime courtiers allegedly favored maintaining continuity with the traditional structures built around Charles and Camilla over the years. Others quietly aligned themselves with William's vision of a more centralized and tightly controlled future. Monarchy. Palace veterans reportedly became divided between what insiders called the continuity loyalists and William's modernization faction, creating an invisible but deeply unsettling fracture running through the institution itself. And for older members of the royal establishment, the situation reportedly triggered painful memories of earlier palace conflicts during the later years of Elizabeth II's reign, when competing personalities and private rivalries sometimes threatened to overshadow the stability of the crown itself. Royal experts now suggest William's long-term objective may extend far beyond staffing reshuffles alone. According to palace speculation, he reportedly wants a leaner, more centralized household structure built around absolute loyalty and operational discipline. Some insiders even describe the approach as coldly strategic, with decisions executed quietly and without emotional hesitation. That perception only deepened after reports emerged claiming certain staff members were informed of changes to their positions with almost no warning at all. No dramatic confrontations, no emotional farewells. Just sudden exclusion from meetings, revised access permissions, and an unmistakable sense that the institution was moving on without them. Inside Clarence house, morale reportedly collapsed rapidly as uncertainty spread through insecure palace corridors. Insiders described the atmosphere as grim and uncertain, with veteran aides privately wondering whether decades of royal service still guaranteed protection in a monarchy preparing for its next era. But beneath the political maneuvering and silent power struggles, another reality was beginning to emerge, one far more emotional and potentially far more explosive than internal staffing wars alone. Because as aides scrambled desperately to protect their influence and futures inside the institution, tensions within the royal family itself were reportedly becoming impossible to ignore. Personal loyalties, private resentments, and old wounds were now colliding directly with questions of succession, trust, and control. And according to palace whispers, those fractures were no longer confined to royal staff operations behind closed doors. They were beginning to reach the family at the center of the monarchy itself. But while aides scrambled to protect their positions, another far more personal dimension of the crisis was beginning to emerge inside the royal family itself. Palace. Insiders now whisper that this was never just about staffing. It was about control. And according to various interpretations of the events, Prince William had decided the monarchy could no longer afford divided centers of power while the crown entered one of its most fragile periods in decades. The deeper the restructuring spread through royal operations, the more it reportedly became clear that William's ambitions extended far beyond removing a handful of advisors connected to Queen Camilla's circle. Sources familiar with palace operations claimed the Prince of Wales had become intensely focused on what insiders were privately calling operational unity across all royal households. To the public, that phrase sounded harmless, even administrative. But inside palace walls, commentators suggest it carried a far more serious meaning. It implied consolidation. Centralization. A quiet transfer of authority away from fragmented royal factions toward one tightly controlled future structure, centered around William himself. And for many longtime courtiers, that possibility felt deeply unsettling. Reports suggest the administrative reviews soon expanded far beyond ceremonial staffing positions. According to Palace Whispers, senior aides connected to scheduling operations, communications channels, and internal access structures allegedly found themselves under increasing scrutiny. Meetings once treated as routine reportedly became tense and carefully monitored. Some staff members were quietly asked to explain decision-making processes that had gone unquestioned for years. Others allegedly discovered their access to sensitive planning discussions had suddenly narrowed without warning. No public accusations were ever made. That was what made the atmosphere feel even colder. Every move appeared calculated, controlled, silent. Royal commentators increasingly framed the situation not as personal revenge against Camilla's allies, but as a form of bureaucratic warfare designed to dismantle competing influence structures before they could threaten the monarchy's next transition of power. Inside palace circles, William's approach reportedly shocked even seasoned royal veterans. For years, many had viewed him as measured, diplomatic, and cautious in handling internal tensions. But according to insiders, something had changed during Charles's ongoing health struggles. Sources claim William had become far more decisive and noticeably less willing to tolerate what he viewed as palace factionalism. Some commentators even began comparing his methods to the famously unforgiving institutional discipline associated with Anne, Princess Royal, whose reputation inside royal operations has long been tied to duty, order, and ruthless efficiency when protecting the institution. The comparison alone reportedly unsettled members of the old establishment. Anne represented an older royal philosophy. The crown above personalities, the institution above sentiment. And now, according to palace speculation, William appeared increasingly willing to adopt that same philosophy as he positioned himself for the future. As tensions intensified, courtiers allegedly began using a chilling phrase internally to describe the strategy unfolding behind closed doors: the Crown Stability Protocol. Whether the term reflected an actual operational framework or merely palace gossip remains unclear. But insiders whisper that it captured the growing belief that William's camp was no longer reacting emotionally to internal conflicts. Instead, they were executing a long-term plan designed to eliminate instability before it could erupt into public crisis. That perception only grew stronger as Buckingham Palace maintained near-total silence regarding the restructuring rumors dominating royal commentary. No direct denials emerged, no detailed clarifications followed. And in the absence of official explanations, speculation spread rapidly across media circles already fascinated by signs of tension within the House of Windsor. For many palace observers, the silence itself became part of the story. Every unanswered question deepened the mystery surrounding what was truly happening inside the monarchy's private operations. Why were veteran aides suddenly disappearing from influential roles? Why were communication structures reportedly being tightened so aggressively during Charles's illness? And why did so many insiders appear convinced that this was merely the opening stage of something far larger still to come? According to some royal commentators, the answer lay in William's growing determination to ensure the monarchy entered its next chapter united under one unquestioned authority. But power struggles inside royal institutions rarely end quietly. The more control one faction gains, the more resistance begins forming in the shadows. And insiders now whisper that opposition to William's strategy was already beginning to grow among figures unwilling to surrender. 3 decades of influence without a fight. However, the deeper William moved into the palace structure, the more resistance reportedly began building behind closed doors. Those close to Queen Camilla reportedly viewed the reshuffle not as modernization but as humiliation. After years spent helping stabilize Charles III's reign, members of her circle allegedly believed they were now being erased from the monarchy's future piece by piece. According to palace whispers, the emotional shock inside. Clarence's house was immediate and deeply personal. Many of Camilla's longtime allies had spent decades surviving public criticism, royal scandals, and fierce media scrutiny while remaining loyal to Charles during some of the darkest periods of his public life. They believed they had endured the storm alongside him. They believed they had earned permanence within the institution. But insiders now claim the sudden restructuring shattered that sense of security almost overnight. Staff members who once operated with confidence reportedly began questioning whether they still had a future at all inside the next generation of the monarchy. Reports suggest many within Camilla's camp felt completely blindsided by how rapidly the changes unfolded. Some insiders allegedly interpreted the move not as administrative efficiency, but as a calculated effort by Prince William to consolidate authority ahead of eventual succession. That belief quickly intensified the emotional divide spreading through. Palace operations. For William's supporters, the restructuring represented discipline, preparation, and institutional survival during a fragile moment for the crown. But for Camilla's loyalists, it reportedly felt like public rejection disguised as modernization. Royal media figures soon began openly discussing the existence of two competing courts operating inside the monarchy itself, one centered around the aging king and queen, the other increasingly orbiting around William and the future of the institution beyond Charles's reign. The phrase alone sent shockwaves through royal commentary because it hinted at something the monarchy always tries desperately to avoid: visible division within the House of Windsor. As speculation intensified, longtime Clarence House staff reportedly grew fearful that they were being permanently frozen out of future royal operations altogether. Sources close to palace administration claim several veteran aides privately worried they would never regain the influence or access they once held. Some allegedly viewed every revised schedule, every restricted meeting invitation, and every quiet reassignment as another signal that their era inside the monarchy was ending faster than anyone expected. What made the situation even more emotionally explosive was the uncertainty surrounding Charles himself. Speculation grew rapidly over whether the king had personally approved every aspect of the restructuring or whether some changes were being driven primarily through William's expanding influence. That question became impossible to ignore inside palace circles. Because if Charles fully supported the operation, it suggested a coordinated transition of authority already underway behind closed doors. But if he did not, then the implications became even more unsettling for the monarchy's fragile internal balance. Meanwhile, palace observers began noticing something else that only fueled speculation further. William's public confidence appeared to be growing. During recent appearances, commentators described him as more composed, more authoritative, and increasingly comfortable projecting the image of a future king already stepping into greater institutional control. For supporters, it reflected leadership during uncertainty. For critics, it reinforced fears that the restructuring represented something far larger than operational reform. The tension between institutional duty and personal loyalty soon became the emotional center of the entire crisis. On one side stood those who believed the monarchy's survival required ruthless discipline and unified control. On the other stood figures who believed loyalty to Charles and Camilla through years of turmoil deserved protection rather than quiet removal. And somewhere between those two forces sat a monarchy struggling desperately to contain growing fractures before they became impossible to hide from the public. But the silence from senior royals only deepened the fascination. Surrounding the crisis. No direct explanations emerged. No emotional reassurances came from the palace. Instead, every unanswered question allowed speculation to spread further through royal media and public conversation alike. Was William merely preparing the monarchy for stability during a vulnerable era? Or was something much more dramatic unfolding beneath the carefully managed silence of palace life? As insiders whispered about shifting loyalties and invisible power struggles, one reality became impossible to ignore. The monarchy no longer felt united behind closed doors. And as the palace tried desperately to contain the fallout, one final question began echoing through royal circles louder than any other. Was this merely a staffing change or the beginning of a new royal order? In royal history, the most devastating power shifts rarely arrive with public announcements. They begin quietly in staffing lists, private memos, revoked access, and the cold language of palace. Restructuring. And according to growing whispers inside royal circles, Prince William's latest move may become remembered as the moment the monarchy's future truly began separating itself from its past. What once appeared to be an isolated internal adjustment inside Clarence house has now evolved into something much larger in the eyes of royal commentators. Analysts increasingly suggest William is no longer merely responding to palace instability surrounding Charles III's health struggles. Instead, insiders believe he may already be shaping the framework of his future reign in real time. That realization has sent a deep chill through royal circles because it transforms the entire crisis from a temporary staffing controversy into something far more historic: the early construction of a new royal order. According to palace observers, the restructuring has gradually come to symbolize preparation for a full generational transition inside the monarchy. Every reassignment, every reduced access privilege, every carefully controlled communication channel now appears connected to a broader institutional shift unfolding behind closed doors. And at the center of that shift sits one painful reality for many longtime courtiers: Queen Camilla's influence no longer appears untouchable. Royal insiders suggest her reduced authority inside palace operations is increasingly being interpreted not as personal punishment, but as a symbol of changing priorities within the crown itself. For 3 years, Camilla's household represented stability around Charles during periods of controversy, illness, and emotional strain. But the monarchy now faces a future that looks dramatically different from the one built during Charles's rise to the throne. And according to insiders, William's camp appears determined to ensure that future is shaped by institutional discipline above personal relationships. That philosophy, the institution first, has reportedly become the dominant mindset, spreading through palace operations. Sources close to royal administration claim loyalty is now being evaluated less through years of service to individual royals and more through alignment with the monarchy's long-term survival strategy. In many ways, historians and commentators argue this mirrors previous succession-era restructurings throughout royal history. Moments when incoming generations quietly dismantled older influence networks to establish firmer control before formally ascending the throne. The difference now is the extraordinary level of public fascination surrounding every whisper of palace tension. Because unlike earlier royal transitions hidden behind palace gates, this modern monarchy exists under relentless media scrutiny, where even silence becomes a statement. And the longer Buckingham Palace refuses to directly address the growing speculation, the more powerful the rumors become. Inside Clarence house, uncertainty reportedly continues spreading among staff members unsure whether their future still exists within the next chapter of royal life. Palace veterans who once viewed themselves as permanent fixtures inside the institution now allegedly fear they are watching an entire era fade quietly into history. That uncertainty reflects something much larger than internal staffing anxiety. It reflects a monarchy struggling to redefine itself while balancing tradition, public pressure, personal loyalty, and the unavoidable reality of generational change. And through it all, William has increasingly been portrayed as firm, disciplined, emotionally controlled. and strategically calculating qualities that supporters view as essential for protecting the crown during an unstable period. But critics interpret as signs of a colder and more unforgiving future monarchy beginning to emerge behind palace walls. For many royal watchers, that may ultimately become the defining legacy of this crisis. Not the headlines, not the staffing reshuffles, not even the silent internal wars between competing palace factions, but the realization that the House of Windsor may already be entering a completely different era under its next generation of leadership. An era where emotion matters less than stability, where loyalty to individuals matters less than loyalty to the institution itself, and where power no longer needs dramatic confrontations to reshape the monarchy forever. Because inside the House of Windsor, power is rarely taken in one dramatic moment, it is reclaimed slowly, silently, and one loyal courtier at a time. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.